Okay, hello everyone in the room and in the Zoom. We've admitted the crowd from the Zoom. We've got an invisible horde with you. For those of you in the room, in the Zoom, you're joining a crowd of 20 something here in person. And I think we're outnumbered by the numbers of pages of beautiful paper that we have with us in the room. So I'm excited to hear from today's guests and to be able to see all of these delightful works that are on display, the works of the Papeterie Saint-Armand. So everyone, I'm Jacqueline Sundberg, and Labiba, my colleague, is standing by on the Zoom chat. So Labiba, if you want to put a message in the chat to make sure you can hear us, there's a wave from Labiba on the Zoom. If you have technical trouble or questions, Labiba is the one who can help you out with that. And the more important note of housekeeping is a reflection on the place and waters of us here at McGill, and also the paper mill. Papeterie Saint-Armand is just south of the canal, and the place that this building occupies is on the McGill's downtown campus. Sorry, that was a lot of campuses in there. McGill University here is located on land that has long served as a place of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples. And included in those peoples are the Kanien'kehá:ka Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabe Nation. We honor, recognize, and respect those nations and peoples who are the traditional stewards of the lands and waters on which our brick and mortar buildings stand today. So thinking about that place, we're glad to welcome everyone who's tuning in from afar. Wherever you're tuning in from, you can chime in the chat and let us know where you're tuning in from. Let us know too if you visited the paper mill over the years, and comments and questions, as I said, put them in the chat. For those here in person, the exits, if should you need them, are to the front of the room here. In case of emergency, there's also a door at the back. The washrooms are out through the reading room and down the hall. If you need them, that's where you'll find them. And on Zoom, we are delighted to have an active chat throughout the event, but we do ask that you respect the community spirit of the event, keep things, share your ideas, your resources, or works in progress, or thoughts about paper making, but do keep it a safe and active, constructive conversation. So with housekeeping taken care of and a thought about the place that we're in, I'm going to introduce my colleague, Anne-Marie, and she's going to introduce today's guest and tell us a little bit more about one particular collection that we're seeing things from today. So Anne-Marie curates the William Colgate History of Printing collection, and I'm going to let her tell you about that and introduce today's guest. Go ahead, Anne-Marie. Thank you, Jacqueline. Would you like to turn up the mic?
Yes.
Okay. Bring it in closer. Is it testing? Testing. Is that okay? Louder. Okay. Welcome. Welcome to everybody. We're so pleased to have this event finally take place. So I'm going to dive right in. I've got some props here too along the way. La Papeterie Saint-Armand, located on the historic Lachine Canal, opened in 1979 under the leadership of David Carruthers. He was joined by Denise Lapointe in 1991, a skilled printer and artist. Both are now award-winning artisans of paper. Today, they will be sharing stories about the origins of the mill, talk about paper-making business in Montreal, and describe the intricate process of paper production. We will come to know their vital role as suppliers to the book trade and as makers of books themselves. Our audience has undoubtedly noticed the resurgence of paper products resulting from a renewed interest in traditional slow media, slow crafts even, I should say. Walking down St. Laurent Street, even as early as last weekend, I encountered an atelier with a huge front window displaying a new generation of paper makers handling a mold and decal to make handmade sheets. The manifold examples of paper ephemera abounds in our daily lives. Everybody has seen this, but perhaps without noticing too much. Posters, packaging, magazines, postcards, labels, stationery, birthday streamers, board games, and even paper ornaments these days are cropping up in little stores that make our Christmases a little more bright and happy. In new paper outlets, I've noticed cropping up in several neighborhoods, artful school supplies and crafty work agendas, calendars, and notebooks. In fact, I have brought an example of the retail product line by the Saint-Armand paper mill, featuring sort of these nice little cahiers of paper notebooks here, and nice, they're nice handmade paper in various sizes. And I also have a small booklet, a bundle of the Saint-Armand paper. And there are several sizes of this product, papier canal, that you can get in stores in Montreal, like at the Avenue des Arts and Au Papier Japonais. So how does paper tie in with rare books? The William Colgate History of Printing collection documents the changing technologies and practices of printing text and image over more than 500 years. Resources on paper making are among the some 14,000 items. So the Colgate collection brings into focus an understanding of the allied trades of book production. So these are the makers and suppliers of equipment, presses, parts, type, ink, paper, tools of the trade, and materials for binders. So in section 7, you're currently in the Colgate seminar room. In section 7 of the Colgate collection, our resources are devoted to paper. So more than 400 books record the history of paper manufacture, types of paper derived from a mix of organic fibers like cotton or linen, hemp, and more. Other resources discuss the complex process of manufacture, whether handmade with molds, perhaps showing a watermark, or machine made, maybe even those mimicking laid paper by the visual evidence of chain lines. So we have a wide array of reference sources as well. And we also have tons of paper sample books. Some are out on display, especially from the industry in England and North America. This is extended by full sheets of pure white paper for printing, with provenance from England, France, and North America of various grades and weights. In addition, there are hundreds of large sheets of decorated papers of all kinds, such as marbled papers, typically used as end papers in historical books, floral papers, colored papers, stenciled papers, and pattern papers of various origins. So paper is a key component of the Colgate collection. In fact, our two knowledgeable and affable guests, Denise Lapointe and David Carruthers, were hard at work earlier this season right here in Rare Books in identifying some of these printing papers in the collection. So thank you, and do not go anywhere because we're not done yet. Denise and David were recently the recipients in 2017, in fact, of the Robert R. Reed Medal for Lifetime Achievement in the Book Arts in Canada, which recognizes lifetime achievement or extraordinary contributions to the book arts. So this award was created in 2007 by the Alcuin Society, founded in Vancouver in 1965. It engages in activities such as lectures, exhibitions, prizes, and hosts the Society's journal named Amphora. I highly recommend an article printed there entitled Paper in the Making by Marlene Chan, in which the dedication, drive, and enthusiasm of Denise and David is well emphasized. And these personal traits stir a profit in the competitive business of papermaking, evidently. There are also some people connections in the scheme of our section on Colgate, Section 7 paper. In our case, the Alcuin Society named this prestigious award after premier typographer and book designer Robert R. Reed, who sadly passed away just earlier this year. Rare Books and Special Collections at McGill University Library is the main repository of Reed's work, especially as it relates to his Montreal years. He spent more than 10 years here in Montreal from approximately 1963 to 1976. So we house some of his designs for the McGill University Press that he was production manager for. And we also safeguard hundreds of samples of his job printing. What people may not know that Reed was also an astute connoisseur of paper. He collected many of the sheets of the aforementioned pieces of paper from around the world on his travels and deposited them here at McGill. In fact, he started a veritable collecting mania for interesting and fine paper specimens. I'm still counting, and clearly we have over 500 various kinds of paper full sheets. So we, of course, have early sheets and samples from the Saint-Armand paper mill. And we've just renewed our collecting intent that needs to be finalized to have the full scope of their paper products. And we're working also on getting their business archive to McGill to be housed and safeguarded in rare books and special collections. We're very, very thrilled with this opportunity. So besides the obvious sheet collection under their name, several Canadian private presses have selected Saint-Armand papers for their limited editions, which are omnipresent in the Colgate collection as well. But seeing the sheets again brings me back to the indelible visions of my site visits to the Saint-Armand paper mill. Denise Lapointe and David Carruthers gave my group and I an animated tour of the premises. You'll probably be noticing this in the film. It was truly a vast manufacturing plant, divided into sections of hanging sheets of paper on cedar branch trees, orderly heaps of paper mounted on wooden island planks, while you hear the dunking sounds of molds being dipped into vats of a watery substance, and the clinking of printing presses in action. Yes, a printing operation was in full swing at the time of my visit. So while upstairs, our tour group climbed up to view the paper-making machine, a lovable monstrosity. The whole experience was eye-opening, and it spoke reams about an intricate and messy business. Let's listen as David and Denise explain.
Can this be heard if I speak in this tone? Can it be? I mean, will it register somewhere? Okay, that's good. So I don't have to.
Okay, good.
All right.
I have to yell.
So I don't have to yell. All right. I'm very happy to be here and thank you for your generous comments, Anne-Marie, and I will try to do them justice. One way I can is to tell the truth.
Only the truth. Anybody has a Bible here?
I'll endeavor to do that.
Tell them, why did you start that?
Well,
I'm so wondering.
Well, a job came to an end at the end of 1978 that I had. It was in paper, in paper making. And I should also mention that my family is and has been in paper making for a long time. So I'm at least the third generation in it. And so my nephews and son and that lot are now fourth generation. And it's given me a real impulse to keep the thing rolling, because it's not just for me and not just for Denise, it's also for people down the line, and the people that Anne-Marie has described on Saint Laurent Boulevard are people who have had some kind of brush with us and have just gotten bitten by a certain kind of insect.
Yeah, we have people who work at the mill who became paper restaurants.
Yeah.
Some open paper stores like Papeterie in Vancouver. Some people became printer, started making books. It was kind of nice to see they would take something out of it and run away.
That's right.
So that was nice.
Scratching an itch.
But tell them how you started that mill. You started with nothing.
Oh, no, it was very little involved.
Or you cashed your pension.
And my then wife had to go and get a job and on and on. It was actually it was something that I have had in my thoughts for a couple of years before that, before I stopped
Because
working.
you had taken a paper workshop with Tim
Barrett, who was
when he was in Montreal, when you took that workshop.
who was a scholar of Oriental
Still
paper
is,
making,
still
and
is.
still is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, those all fed into my, and Saint-Gilles
Obsession.
too. I had
Yes,
had a visit at
Yeah, it's
Saint-Gilles.
true. They started before
down the
us.
river.
They started in 79. They started
that's
about
right.
2 years earlier.
Yeah, that's right. So they too were, I had seen
So
what they
then
were doing.
bingo, you start, you have nothing, you don't have a paper mold, you make your first paper mold of aluminum tubes.
It could almost be described as making a paper mold from a snowshoe. It had a wooden frame and a sort of a network or
It was a bit rough the first
except
years.
that I had gone to a man who made lawn furniture out of tubular framing, and I got him to make me more or less a square or rectangular piece, which I then strung across with various wires. And
I wish we still have one of those, because
I
this I
know.
never saw. And we're not that well documented. So all the beginning of the mill, there's not much to see. So, but that was kind of interesting. And then, of course, you kept moving because we're on the fifth location.
this is the fifth mill
Yeah.
we're in now, and it looks like we'll maybe be in a sixth some
Well,
point.
it's another story.
That's
But
another
your-
story.
Your
Yeah.
first mill, you kept flooding the guys downstairs because his first mill was on the floor. You never have. don't-
Wooden floor, yeah.
Yeah, don't do
That's
that. He made a kind of a swimming pool, flooded the guy downstairs enough that he had to leave the building. Second
Yeah.
mill, a wall fell off. Isn't that
Correct.
the one?
Walls were falling.
It went a wall
And-
like
The next mill though was a more appropriate
Ottawa
place.
Street,
That would have been on Ottawa Street. That
except
was
the fact there was no
fourth.
heat, there's nothing perfect.
So those are, but each time I moved, I got a little bigger. I picked up some equipment along the way, and a lot of which is still with us. So it's still being used. The press at some point we were able to buy is still in daily use today.
And one of the first paper mold made by Lee McDonald, this one is never rotted. It dates from what, 1980, 81?
1979 even.
Yeah, and we still have the invoice, costs about $220, and it's in perfect shape. Some mold made later fell apart. It's mahogany, you never know. That was kind of strange.
Mhm. That's
And
right.
then, actually, yeah, that's a funny one. We're talking about books, the challenge of books. This is 1982, Lettre de Californie. It's printed Pierre Filion at Édition du Silence. And I love it. Tell them the story
Well-
about the color of the paper. You misunderstood Pierre.
That's right. He asked me to make a paper that was about the color of brick. And I misunderstood. My French was rusty or not,
Not there
Even-
yet, that's it.
was still incipient, I guess. It was, so I took it as being, he wanted chips of brick
In the paper.
added to the pulp, which is
May I point out it's letterpress with lead.
letterpress with
Before
lead.
polymer
Yeah.
plates.
And by God, Pierre is still my friend, but you could have excused him for having cut our association off right then and
Yeah.
there. So
Yeah.
Pierre,
Fair enough that he asked you to print a book. That's your book of the Angava trip, which he printed about 5 years ago.
yeah,
But that was, talk about challenge of books, that was one.
but we had to deal with Pierre. We had to listen a little more carefully when he would give us an order.
Yeah.
But he's still a good,
Actually,
still a very good.
Édition du Silence, his presses are in the mill. He moved in
Yeah.
the year 2000
Yeah.
because he needed space, so we stuck his Ludlow and all his presses in a corner. That's why we've been developing a lot of stuff for books. No, don't start reading it.
No, I'm not reading it.
trying to
I'm
find
just-
the chunk of
I'm
bricks
trying to
now.
find the chunks of brick that would amuse you, I think, if
No,
you,
I think we
after
can do
this,
that. Because
after
you'll
the
be able to
show.
handle the books.
Yeah,
No,
you can,
yeah, we can throw it around, but
you can pass it around.
that's a good idea.
Oh, okay.
Okay, so that's okay. Now, let's explain, because at the time you were buying pulp, you would buy often off-spec pulp.
Mhm.
Who was the maker of
Well,
that?
I had a lot of friends in the paper industry when I stopped working for the Pulp and Paper Association. So I knew where mills were and I knew what they made. And I had a lot of people I knew in the business and in the industry at the time. I wanted a very good rag pulp. I knew enough about paper that I knew that the longest lasting papers and the hardest working papers are those made from pure rag. So I was able to get into the mill that made Canadian currency. At the time, it was made out of linen rag. And if you have an old dollar bill, you can probably understand what kind of wear and tear it had to put up with. So linen was, to me, the gold standard of paper making
that's the one
fibers.
you use that linen pulp for the Canadian Constitution.
That's correct.
Yeah, when he did the
Yeah.
Constitution in, sorry, I have a date there.
83.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
I bought a copy because they made an offset edition too. So there's a copy you can touch there. So it was pure linen pulp that you
Yeah.
bought.
that I bought and would get also off-spec pulp
Like
that they
little
might
flecks.
have bought.
Yeah, they
that
might have had some flex in it, or it was not perfect for making on a paper machine, but
Yeah.
you would buy them.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it was a fine paper mill owned by Domtar. And I was very lucky to be able to get their off-spec pulp that they would not use for various reasons, that they would
Yeah.
not use for the Canadian currency.
So you did that until,
And at last, I used to get that maybe once or twice a year, a great big stack of it, and it was in wet lap form.
I remember
So-
once I went to visit and there were basically an iceberg outside. It was gone. And is that iceberg being delivered outside frozen solid? So I had to beg the neighbor to let it in his building, our relève actually,
Yes, that's right.
to let it unfreeze because it didn't go through the door. It was just like a monster. And I knew nothing at the time. I was just a friend of David. So that was pretty strange. But then your dream was always, always to have a paper machine and a beater.
That's true. I didn't know where to stop. But I did feel
So down.
I needed a proper pulper and a proper paper machine, as well as the handmaids that I already was in. And so I was making handmade paper right from the get-go. And I was it was a sort of monkish existence. I little by little picked up people who would work with me, and they were extraordinary people. In many cases, there were some losers. There were some people that didn't work out, but I've really stayed in touch with a lot of them. And in many cases, they've gone on and stayed to some degree around the
Yeah,
margins of
link the
paper making.
yeah. But then what you do, you heard about the CIP.
One of
Paper machines.
my students was a man named Ted Snyder, and he was a senior engineer with a company called CIP, Canadian International Paper. And again, it was an industry contact that I had. And I can't stress enough to anyone starting a business to get into manufacturing, but collect all the people you can. Find out as much as you can about what they do, because it's not a question of you might need them. You will need them. Or you will need their wives, or you will need their kids.
Oh, depends. That might sound a little strange.
No,
there.
it's okay. Fair
But
enough.
anyway, you heard about that machine. You got there.
Yeah.
You bought it. You had no building to put it in. We were supposed to run the whole thing in Augsburg. You remember that thing?
That's
'Cause
true.
I wasn't working at the mill yet. I was living with David. So it's supposed to all be in Augsburg, the hand mill and everything. Then you bought the beater in Connecticut.
That's right.
Then here comes the truck to Montreal.
Yeah.
And he said, I'm not going any further. Okay, you've seen in the film, the big thing, the big wheel? There were four of them. The trucker said, I'm not a cab. I'm not going anywhere. I'm just staying here. So David had to find a place to put his beaters because we had four of those big things. 3 got stolen, by the way. Yeah, it's amazing what can happen. So basically you phone around.
Yeah.
And we got in the building we're in because he knew the landlord. He was the one who rented the space with the falling wall at some point in this history. And you basically put the beater there.
Yeah, I talked him in, Mark Kaufman, he was a guy that supplied me with rag.
No, later, he didn't.
I know,
He didn't
I know,
rag.
but
Yeah.
still.
He had
that's
the
what
rag.
his-
You knew he had the rag.
I knew he had the rag, and I needed him more than he needed me.
Still do.
It's true. It's true. But still, he took me, and he was bitten somewhat by the bug of paper making, and he let me get into his building, and I'm still there.
So when
And-
the beater came in, the whole space was empty. It was like about 10,000 square feet with just a beater.
Yeah.
Because you were still bringing the pulp to Oxford. So they would put barrels of pulp with holes during the water on a flatbed truck, pissing all the way to Oxbury to try that paper machine. So the first time I was with you, David and I started the paper machine, not having an idea.
No, we didn't have a clue about it. And also, we didn't realize that it had some structural difficulties, and that's one of the reasons that it was not being used. So we
Together with
knew,
that.
about the paper machine, and I luckily had a couple of people who had helped me in the past. We set them up in an old boardroom in the
Oh, yeah.
building.
A couple moved in.
Yeah.
Rudy van
they-
der Velde and
and
Constanza.
Constanza
Basically, the
Gill.
first thing they did is set a little coffee machine, and they were running a paper machine with barrels of pulp, truck from Montreal. It was a real mess.
Yeah,
Then they told you if you don't get that machine out of there because of the smell, the pulp would rot between batches. You moved the whole paper machine to Montreal.
yes. And Mark Kaufman again played host. And the paper machine went in the early 90s. We had,
91, 92.
we had a lot of trouble getting it going, but it permitted us to really take a major leap or major step into an industrial,
And also being able
framework.
to use your different fibers, because before that, you were buying white pulp,
Yeah.
cotton, linen. After that, we started beating stuff like, here we go. You have here,
size of
it's this one, linen tow.
linen tow, yeah.
Yeah.
Which we were able to get from all over Canada because, of course, it was a Canadian fiber. And
Tow,
Tow, it was tow.
T-O-W, this is the,
tow is T-O-W, or in French, it's toupee.
this is like the shorter fiber of the linen,
Yeah.
but they're still long, you can spin that stuff. And you had, of course, the white linen, which we found.
We were able to get white linen, which is actually in bleached form,
Yeah.
bleached cloth, offcuts
from manufacturer.
from a man who makes shirts
With
in
dip.
Massachusetts. And we have,
Yeah, that's the other thing. In 91, 92, most of the clothes in Canada were made in Montreal. It's before we open up. So we could take the phone. I still think about it. I remember you would order 10 bales of 800 pounds of white rag sorted. Now we pick them up in various little shops. So it was like paradise. Like we could have, remember we had a shop making red, blue, and yellow. I think they were aprons. So we would have those three basic colors, didn't have to dye anything. Jeans were not spandex yet. People asked for not so big, I don't know. We got, they used to be pure cotton jeans. Now it doesn't exist anymore. Then coffee bags.
coffee bags started coming in, and this is actually an example of it. It's a jute coffee bag from that part of the world where jute grows and they grow coffee. Because there are, oh, sure.
Yeah,
sure.
that's why we put the
Yes,
note.
let's do that.
In each
Yeah.
bag, you can open the bag, there's a piece of the paper made with that bag.
Yeah, that's right.
So that was, it helped, the machine was used to dry the pulp that we beat in the beater. So
Fireman's
that
t-shirts.
enlarged, yeah, that's Montreal fireman t-shirt, we got the offcut. It enlarged immensely the possibility of the handmade, because before that was only cotton. And with the linen, we could do very sharp stuff, like we did, remember that paper for Sweden?
Yeah,
They were shooting a cannon and needed pure linen paper. So we shipped them 24 sheets to put the black powder in.
it was an old
Yeah, you can-
Swedish warship from the 1650s
Yeah.
that had been restored, and they were wanting to find out what was it like on the quarter deck, or not on the quarter deck, but on the gun deck
And
a warship.
the impact on the oak of the boat.
And
That's very
what-
funny. You can go online and the Vasa Museum, you can see the cannon. Just keep in
Oh,
mind,
geez.
it's our paper that wraps the black powder.
It was we were making the, I guess it was not gun,
Yeah,
cartridge
no,
paper.
no, no, yeah,
That's
but
what
it
it
was
was
for the
called.
yeah, we did some too,
Cartridge paper. We made it out of linen because that's what they used in those days.
Yeah, it was 1500, so there were not much cotton in Europe.
But this was, and we have a film.
Yeah,
It
it's
was
on our
it's the
website.
most frightening thing you ever saw.
Yeah. Don't get too excited there.
You're seeing the cannonball ripping through an oak
wall.
replica of a warship of the day, and the splintering and the effect of that. I won't
It
go.
backs about 12 feet, the cannon. Anyway, it's very impressive. So here's more linen paper. You can hear it.
Where's the source fabric from now?
This actually is linen tow, and we have bales of it that we bought from people. When there's fibers around, someone's going to tell us.
We'll be told. The answer to the question, though, is I make a tour of the city, Montreal, every week. And I pick up offcuts that have been accumulated.
Perfect example. Mixed color gave us the green. So it was it's a shop that makes bed sheets. And because there's a bit of manufacturing coming back to Montreal, but we have to pick up everything now. So this shop, we unmix the white bed sheets from the color bed sheets, and the color bed sheets are used to make those paper. Here you'll see one, it's written on it's 1 hour beat and the full beat. That's a good one to look at.
It's informative, yeah. But the answer is that it's still sourced locally, and I'm able to get quite an array of things. Not quite,
White cotton.
yeah, that's right. That's for watercolor, white cotton. Those are from bed sheets, and extraordinary quality too. It's an Italian cloth.
Yeah, it's made
From
in
it-
Italy.
Oh, the thread count on some of this stuff is just really unbelievable.
Faraoni.
Someone in the chat actually commented that they used your papers for watercolor. So maybe this is it right here.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Anyway,
So send those back too.
yeah.
Okay, so let's now move on to some
Thanks,
book.
Jacqueline.
Let's go back to books here in the library. I'm just gonna tell the whole story, which I find very amusing. We've been making paper a few times for the Bank of Canada and other stuff with shredded money. And I just learned through one employee said, well, someone told me that they think we're making, the legend, urban legend is that we make currency, fake dollar bills. And I heard that story 2 or 3 times already, which I find incredible. Because if we did, I wouldn't be here, we'd be rich.
We'd be rich and probably in jail.
Yeah, it's flecks of money. So, because
And you do get these strange requests, like the chaps from the Congo who came in wanting a passport
Oh, yeah.
paper. We would have done that.
he wanted some watermark of money. Here you have a funny sheet. Touch this one, it's got polyester in it. It was contaminated, but it's a nice sheet of paper, but you could do it by hand, but on the machine, it sticks to the hot rolls. You can touch it, you'll feel little flecks.
Yeah, there's no real reason why you couldn't air dry a handmade from almost pure polyester, but it wouldn't have the tensile strength that the cotton gives it, or the linen gives it. So, but you could make something that would loosely hold together.
Okay, let's go on the challenge of a few books. We deal a lot with Gasparo Press, who you probably know, they're in Nova Scotia. And this year, they wanted that color, handmade. We couldn't do it. We're short-staffed now all the time. I cannot find people who want to work more than 2 days a week. So we decided to do it on the paper machine, but for some reason, that rag, which we didn't know what it was unbleached cotton. It totally clogged the felt of the machine. So what we did, I went between 2 sections, picked up the wet sheet before they dry, and we embossed them with a texture. Because it was a rush, it had to be done. But now the funny thing is they think it might win a prize, so they want more. We're gonna have to make now a handmade sheet, looking at the machine sheet that look like a handmade sheet. Something to cheer me up.
No, and we, we have recently sold the paper machine
Yes.
to a company in Kingston that I hope will be able to carry on some of this paper making.
Okay, let's move to other challenge. This is kind of interesting. This is Bob Barris. The paper inside is our paper. And Bob Barris, something, you notice David stopped reading each time I gave him a book. The whole edition was sold. Only David once told Bob, I think there's a sentence missing. Nobody had ever noticed. So it tells me about book collectors, librarians. There's a chunk of missing in that text somewhere.
And Bob was so mad that he hasn't bought since.
No, it's not true.
It's good. Yeah, this one is lovely. Yeah, that was nice.
There's this one is kind of fun. This one, I think Michael Tarosian of Lumiere Press is probably the best printer in Canada. We only do for him stuff like the inlay of that one and the blue-black paper on the cover. It's exquisite work. It's amazingly work. It's very challenging because he has a very narrow choice of color. Very, you have to really match a lot of stuff, and we love him deeply. If we don't put it in, it's impossible.
No, I won't put it all the way in. Action, there we go.
But that was a nice challenge, this one. This is
Michael Tarosian.
In Toronto.
What's the name of Lumiere Press?
Lumiere
Yeah,
Press.
you've
and
heard of it, I'm sure. Yeah.
He works mostly about photography, the history of photography, and it's original text.
Yeah.
Here we have a guy that we've been followed since when he started making books, Mark McMurray. He did a lot of small books, about music. It's magazine articles that he reprints, old magazine articles. But the challenge with him was once upon a time, he comes to the mill from New York State to buy paper. Once he bought some sheets, started the book, we didn't know. And it was a machine-made paper. He needed 100 sheets. We ran the machine just for him.
I have a question. I see lots of water in this video.
Yes.
And you spoke about a flood. But maybe it's a silly question, but are there certain areas, for instance, where the water quality adds to the quality of the paper?
No, we're plain city water, except during when they did the échangeur Turcot, they kept cutting the water. That was a nightmare for months.
And every time they started it again, it would be muddy. It would be all muddy. And it was a bad time for us, because we were having to always deal with that, and they would rarely phone to tell us.
But it was
what we were in for.
Transport Québec has priority over the city of Montreal. They were not allowed to take the water, but they took it anyway. Anyway, that's a long story. We can give you detail of that. But plain city water is good.
Yeah, it's a good water, and they don't have to do much treatment. It's actually quite extraordinary. It comes right out of the middle of the Lachine Rapid, and it's I think you could almost drink it.
Okay, here's the
it's another story.
The challenge.
It's another
book.
story. Okay.
This is that section because Mark McMurray took a year off to do The Tempest from Shakespeare. And that section, he had picked up 2 or 3 sheets at the mill, and he came back a few months later. One of his sections had to be that. So we remade that paper. A paper machine batch is 2,000 sheets, 2,500 sheets on our tiny machine. And we did 100, we did it. That's what you talk about book challenge and not getting rich in books. That was very fun. I have this one. This is on the most, I think that's interesting too. Mark McMurray gave us a copy free of each of his books, which is not everybody does that. This is very, very generous because that thing doesn't sell for $4.95. There we go. You should look at that one.
That's a strange one there. It's an
This one,
Edward Lear.
Let's open it. Yeah, bring it back. I'll open it for the people.
Yeah.
This is Edward Lear. And it's the P's go to C, and he has that little turning thing. It's a Volvel in French.
Volvel, oui.
Yeah, and he
Yeah.
has a lot in his books. He has a lot of games like this. It's very, very, very nice. A friend of mine told me it's poetry I can understand.
The poem is a hoot.
Now, not for fun, we'll go into. I was for fun showing you the scope. There's a kind of an interesting scope at the mill of people popping in and out because you never know who the next person's going to be.
Yeah.
And I have those two sheets. One was a few years ago. There were a man who came and he said, "Oh, my father has Parkinson," and he was suggested to keep his balance to paint. So I gave him the paper. I gave him a block, and his father sent me that nice painting. So that's kind of fun. It's because if you work just for money, it would be sad. But this one, actually, I just found it yesterday. It cracks me up because each time some people have visitors remotely linked to paper, they bring them to the mill. And that time it was a man called Akinori Okawa from Japan, who is a specialist in identification of Japanese paper. He came to the mill, and at the time I think it was funny. We had a vat of red, and a vat is a pulp basin, a vat of red, a vat of white, and we do circles. So I told David, we made a Japanese flag. That was very nice. But then, he gave us all those gifts. Japanese, they blow you away with gifts. So what David did in his wisdom, he managed to find someone who was restoring a mummy. So we sent a piece of 4,000-year-old rag from a mummy, of which we still have a piece. And it's a woman mummy. That was great fun. We floored him. It's year 2000. I just found that in the archives.
When he sent me a letter thanking me for this, it was with almost reverence because he's not to me, but the reverence was toward the young woman whose mummy it was. And so,
because it says that the oldest one of the sample that I've collected for my research has so far been the fibers of the hemp paper made in the 3rd, 5th century. And he gives a name of the explorer who found it. So it's the kind of thing that made the mill so valuable. Having those people coming in and just finding stuff like this. Where do we go from there? Oh,
yeah, here's another one. Jacqueline, this is.
yeah. Yeah. This is also someone who gives us a book. This is Claire Van Vliet, and I was trying to find what's very amusing is that in one of her books, she gave us some of them. She had to replace a paper with our paper, but the colophon doesn't say it's our paper. And I was trying to find that one because I found it so amusing. But here it's our paper and it's well named, but it's a nice book. She would tend to come in, and the last time she came, she's aging. So she was sitting at a table with her sandwich, and I had to go and fetch paper for her. And I would find, she was amazed because she described something, I'd find a paper like what she wanted. So we had a great time. So that's a very interesting book. But always a bit complicated in the structure, but at least for her, she gets paper that's already made.
Here's Claire's.
This is, if you don't have the books from Hugh Barclay, you should.
Hugh Barclay, Chris, does that ring a bell? He's Ontario-based,
He just died, actually.
and he just died. Yeah.
But for years, he was another guy that we made paper for.
You would get a book from 90% of the people doing fine printing, and you would look at it and you said, I probably won't sleep. I won't go to bed to read this book. But with Hugh's work, it was always the book, not always the best printed.
And there's typos.
And
You offered him
typos,
to correct his
yes,
typos
he would have
once.
typos too, and he would. But the thing about Hugh, there were such good stories.
Yeah.
They were just
Like this
wonderful
one, the
stories.
inside of the book is bigger than the cover of the book. It's folded against the grain. And, but we love that guy. We just love that guy.
Anything like his brother was nicknamed Turk Barkley. And the reason he was called Turk Barkley is because he was nicknamed after the famous Toronto Maple Leaf goalie, Turk Broda.
So you
And,
wrote a booklet
but the
about it.
funny thing of the story is, the funny part of it is that they were part of a hockey team called the Belleville McLarens, I think. Anyway, whatever. It was McLaren's Motors would sponsor this particular hockey, but they won the Canadian Championship and of course went to the Olympics. So back in the 50s,
So he published something about that.
he
And,
published
it
the
would have
story.
Always something you would read and it's marvelous because most letterpress book, as I mentioned earlier, with the one that's missing a sentence, nobody reads them. So this, people were reading it. So you, Barclay, if you find any of his, buy them. He also did the email of his daughter who was working in a rooming house in
Yes.
Vancouver Island.
Yes.
He published the emails with the spelling mistakes, and it's called, what the heck is it?
I've forgotten it.
But anyway, he was giving it for free. He has a fancy edition, bound in jute. And he also, the rest was just photocopied for free, and it's a great read. We have it, I don't have it here, we have it somewhere.
So I'm just,
Relatively farmers.
oh, there you go. Steven's got the name of the team.
No, because
So what I'm gonna
I
do-
read this-
McFarland's,
Yeah.
that's right, Stephen. Yeah, thank you.
So at this
Thank
point, I know we can all tell that there are years of stories that we could pull out of these.
What's about time now?
So for now, I'm going to open it up to questions. We have two in the chat, one of which is on topics of what you're talking about, asking how many of these books are one of a kind or limited edition rights.
No.
Limited edition. They're
They're all
all
limited
all
edition.
editions. Yeah, some longer, some not. So, but the fact is that they are all. I think it's actually part of the deal. If you're making you don't do a one-off as it's a very rare book in a simply because the amount of work to produce one book is about exactly as much as to do 100, except for the printing portion.
Depends on
What would be and what would be an example of a one-off?
Other
Because
than
we've
who
had,
did one with the giant circles. I forgot it was like the giant circle every day, there'd be a
that's
circle
one
falling
we'll
30
tell
inches.
that story.
Yeah, that's,
We'll
so
tell
we
that
had a lot
story.
of one, there were one on a concrete block in a lozenge shape that,
Yes.
there were a lot of
Yes, that's
very,
true.
very, very, and also the huge book. But the biggest one we did actually, that's an edition, was for a 2-pound press. The last
£2.
ship.
That's right,
Who
£2.
wrote
That's
that?
right.
Yeah, that's a monster.
Libby Roosevelt.
No,
or
no,
something
no, no,
like
no, no, no,
that.
no, no, no. But we had a
Right,
few
so-
extremely big
Yes.
real projects.
Yeah. So we do have this hook link with the book arts is one that's very, very important to us. And whatever, I mean, we're getting on and we really must hang up our molds and decals pretty soon.
Eventually, yeah,
On
But-
that
Another
note, we
question.
have a question
Yeah.
yeah, no question.
From the chat, and we have some in the room too. One is, can people come and visit the mill?
Sure.
Question from the
Oh,
chat.
yeah.
And if
Oh, yeah.
so, what's the protocol?
9 to 5 except Mondays.
And
Put
should
it
they
9 to
call
4.
websites?
No, it's okay now. It might be good to call because we're short staff now. Sometimes it's better to call. Yeah, but Mondays are not good. That's the day when we might not be there.
One follow-up question from the chat as well.
Mhm.
Interest in where you source your jeans cotton these days. One person mentioned that Naked and Famous is a Montreal jeans producer that uses raw denim, and I can testify because I have a couple of pairs of
Yeah,
those.
I heard about
And
them.
without stretchy?
Yes.
Oh,
I heard
So
about
okay.
them.
there's a
Oh,
source. you
Yeah,
should,
Thank you.
we're planning to contact them.
Naked
Actually.
and
Naked and
Famous.
Famous, yes.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I am.
No, I had a note.
It's not
Yeah,
exactly,
yeah.
not exactly like Stanfield's, is it?
We have a question in the room, in the green sweater, and then Stephen.
So, thank you for the presentation. I am a printmaker and a mechanical artist, and I work on 300 pound hot press,
Wow.
which is getting much harder to find.
We don't do much hot press because it's made on machine that have big calendars and it goes very fast and they polish it. Most people who buy our paper, they buy it for the slight texture. And we made etching paper for anybody from Jasper Jones to, what's the other one? We were at New York Central Supply, our etching paper was used by every artist at the time.
That
So-
stars disappeared.
Yeah, I know. It was
Yeah.
outbreaking
Just
for
for the
us.
Zoom crowd, I'll repeat the question was, we have a print artist in the room who's looking for a specific weight of hot press paper, botanical and.
No, I'm not looking for that
Oh, no.
paper. I'm just remarking on how much more difficult it is to find these
Okay.
materials. And,
Oh,
So
this
yes,
is
a comment
expensive they're becoming.
that
No, no,
the
there's a-
market is changing.
Yeah, there's a string of mill that closed because David had a friend, Mr. Cook, Tom Cook. He stopped working at 92. So Mr. Cook's job was to just produce paper for companies on machine. And he knew each time a paper mill would close, he'd phone David because David knows the mills to kind of nearly cry. So it's been big mills by small mill and then they stopped the production of the fancy paper. So if you have a chance, look at the old samplers, which we have a collection of,
And here,
and here,
I
and you'll
think
see stuff you're never going to see again.
Yeah.
Everything is getting bland.
For those of you in the room, we're going to continue the Q&A, but you're welcome to also stand up and look at the samples. And if you do have questions, you can come up and voice them here. Then everyone in the Zoom crowd will also hear them in the room. But I will invite you to look at the samples on the side and to come up, approach. And if you do have questions, there's one from Stephen and Lauren. You can
I
come.
do have a question, actually. It wasn't just a remark. It was, how do we preserve this know-how and continue making high quality materials?
How do we preserve the know-how and
Well-
continue making high quality materials?
What's
we,
in every other
we
field?
have to we will be making, we have that very much in the forefront of our mind, that very problem. Because, at some point,
Maybe one solution was to stop buying shit.
what we'll do is we will settle most of the technology, the know-how and whatever on the people that we think are able to carry on.
But already in the US, there's a whole bunch of small hand mills in the US, more than here,
Mhm.
because they have a bigger market. Here, it's a small market. So that's the problem is the market.
Mhm.
But there's always a revival of it. I don't lose sleep over it because it's been always revival of this, revival of that. So
There will be, you'll find the paper you. Bye-bye. That was good.
Another question from the Zoom room. About the name. Why did you choose the name Papeterie Saint-Armand?
Well, that was because I sold a small dairy farm near Saint-Armand in the townships to raise money for this. What happened was I looked around, I was in the town of Dunham, and I didn't think Dunham paper would have the same kind of cachet as a couple of other of the smaller villages around. Felixburg,
but from
But
Saint-Armand never
Saint-Armand-
existed. There's no
in-
Saint-Armand at Czech.
well, that's true, but there is a
You
town
can
called
make it
Saint
up.
Armand on the border. So it was the reason for the name. And
So
we still have a kind of relationship with the town people. They've started a letter writing society, which I don't think they use our paper necessarily, but they do
Yeah,
at
they-
least have this, there's something that's been cultivated maybe because of a contact. Yeah.
Stephen.
What was, at the beginning of the video, this wonderful video, you're wearing that beautiful hat, and I love your sweater. You're sort of squatting and lighting something.
Oh, that.
What is all that about?
That's a good question.
That's the good question. It's the good question. One of them being that it is I would use a flame test on the rag incoming. And because of the paper machine's nature, it's running hot on the
Right.
dryers, it would melt out a poly nylon cloth in a little bead that would ultimately coat the dryer. And it would make a mess, a
But
real
the
mess.
handmaids can make a little bead of a little blob.
It's not so bad, but
No, but it's still a pain.
you do,
Yeah.
you do not, as a rule, try to find a polycotton for paper making.
Because the polyester is a filament like silk, so you cannot beat it.
So
It's
when
got
I'm,
no
what I'm doing,
cellulose.
you
Yeah.
may see the shiny portion of
Right.
the burn. It's a smolt.
And the
where
color of the ashes and the smoke, it's like electing a pope. You look at the color of the smoke. And you have this,
I feel like we should buy you a crucible.
it's all religious.
This is right outside our door, yeah.
Yeah, that was a
The
fun.
the fumes aren't dangerous at all?
While we're outside.
Well,
it's
we're
a small
outside,
thing.
so we're-
Inside, I'm saying.
There's no fumes.
No, there are no fumes.
It's a mechanical beating, so
Okay.
there's no chemical. It's a chemical reaction. The beat change the nature of the fiber and there'll be then the hydrogen bonding and everything, but it's just beating the fiber. So
Mhm.
there's not much chemistry in the mill. That's very amusing.
That's pretty much mechanical pulping, so you can quite literally drink the effluent. And you could, I mean, you're not,
So if
nothing
we
in it is
visit
going
the
to hurt
mill,
you.
we'll have
Yeah.
Tea,
Yeah, well,
tea in air quotes.
the water goes bad quickly because the fiber are happy with the water because they used to rot rag to make it beat faster. They would basically have the cotton, the linen in water for a month, 2 months. And so it rotted, it would be easier to beat. So of course, if you leave the fibers in the water goes absolutely cabbage smelling.
If you also, and they would also use skim milk as a pulping. So you would
To rot
put all
faster.
your rot, or you put all your rag into a vat or basin of skim milk, and it would have that, it would do its job, and it would soften the rag and, break down some of the fiber to fiber bonding in the rag. And that would make it easier.
I have two more questions in the Zoom room, and I think we have one from Lauren at the back.
Mine is the same as the.
Okay, great. Well, then, the question from the Zoom room was, did you ever find out who took your beaters?
Yes, of course.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I made a citizen's arrest.
Oh.
Yes,
David's specialty.
I
Here's the
did.
story.
It was a shock to me. We had 3 beaters in the yard. Now, admittedly, it was, should have been under lock and
No,
key.
they were surrounded by stuff too.
Yeah.
The guy borrowed his bus crane.
Yeah.
Can I borrow your crane for the weekend?
And dumped her.
Yeah, and a dump
Mhm.
truck. Can I borrow a dump truck and a crane? And the guy, the owner, it's a scrap yard, so the owner never asked any question. And David, it was not this complicated story. Anyway, you found the guy. Let's make it short.
Found the fellow, and now I say a citizen's arrest. It was not to take him to the police. I just wanted him to know that I knew who had done it.
And he found the beater.
I
but they
found
were
him,
already on
I
a
found the
scrap
beater
pile.
through a scrapyard, several scrapyards on St. Patrick Street in the day. So what more did you need? I made the man, and he had received a pittance, like $800
for
for
3
the-
beater.
for 3 beaters.
Yeah.
And so I
And there was
made,
scrap.
You know, probably whoever bought them, we don't know what they are.
No,
No,
they
no,
wouldn't.
but-
No.
no, they were, by then it was.
No,
we
they
can do
wouldn't
that.
know.
They were on a pile of scrap, like 30 feet in the air.
oh, yeah.
And the boss reaction was, well, my employee is still $100,000 from me in a year. He didn't give a shit. That was very nice.
Yeah.
fun.
Oh, St. Patrick Street was a tough street in those days.
It
Yes.
wasn't gentrified yet.
But I got the $800 at least, but that was not exactly sufficient payment. But that was
Oh, yeah,
it.
this
That
one
was
we
it.
beat
So I'll
the guys.
just come in frame on the
Cool.
camera
Okay.
here for a couple of thank yous, because we're at 1 PM. So we're gonna end there, but I want to say an enormous thank you to Denise and David for sharing your craft and your stories and your samples with us. One of the other questions in the Zoom room was actually whether your sample bags would be available to see here at a later date. And the answer is
Yes.
Yes.
because We'll bring you something in January.
yes. So yes, we will be able to see some of that material here. So an enormous thank you from us. This is our last ROAAR event of the year, but we will be back in January in the new year. So you can tune in. We're going to have a vernissage for the new lobby exhibition. So thanks everyone. Feel free in the room to look at the samples and enjoy the paper.
Thank
Bye
you.
for now.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
But you can come to
About
the-
60.
60.